Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I'll tell you about the HOA that thinks I should give them a room. I was mid-sandwich when the doorbell started its panic attack routine. 3 quick jabs, a pause like the caller had to inhale indignation, then 3 more. I figured a package, maybe the delivery driver's elbow slipping. I had mustard on my fingertips and not a single expectation of what came next. When I opened the door, a woman in a blazer the color of wilted spinach planted herself on my top step and angled a clipboard like it was a badge. She had a haircut that radiated discipline and teeth that flashed on certain words as if punctuation had sharp edges. 4 steps behind, a young guy hovered with a duffel bag and a look like he wished the sidewalk would swallow him. 2 more people lingered across the street, pretending to deadhead geraniums while staring directly at my porch. "Hi," she trilled. "I'm Marla, temporary chair of the Community Compliance Committee. You must be the new owner." "Newish," I said, wiping my hands on my jeans. I'd closed on the house 3 months before. I'd done more drywall patching than sleeping. My garage was a maze of labeled bins. It was becoming a home 1 after-work hour at a time. "Wonderful," she said with the air of a dentist saying, "You won't feel a thing. We're here to place Trey." The duffel guy lifted a hand in half a wave. "Hi." "Place him? Where?" I asked, slow and careful like I might be explaining kitchen appliances to a raccoon. "In your spare room, obviously," Marla said. "Our bylaws permit temporary community placements when we have an urgent safety need. We've had incidents, and the board commits to a visible presence. Trey is our night patrol. You'll be compensated with a community credit." Across the street, the geranium duo nodded like a laugh track. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once, then decided to stay out of it. I'd read the governing documents. They were stacked on my dining table the night I moved in. An origami nightmare of acronyms. I skimmed them initially. Then after my second ARC application ping-ponged for a month because a committee member didn't like the tone of gray, I read them thoroughly. I had never once seen community placement. "No," I said. Marla blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "Respectfully," I said, "no, I don't rent rooms, I don't host security guards or committee mascots. That's not a thing. You're refusing an approved board directive?" She had a smile that was all gums and no warmth, and the clipboard wrote something without being told to. "I'm refusing a stranger and his duffel to move into my house," I said. "If you'd like, you can email me the policy you're referencing and I'll read it, but he's not moving in. I don't know him." Trey looked relieved to be the optional variable. "I can call my cousin," he said to Marla. "I can crash with them for a few nights. It's okay." Marla didn't break eye contact with me. "It isn't okay. People like you make it impossible to maintain standards. People like owners? People who don't cooperate. What did you expect?" She stepped closer, which meant her perfume stepped into my lungs. "Everyone knows about the eviction." "Eviction?" I repeated, so flat the word could have been a plank I was about to walk. "You were evicted from your last place," she said, triumphant. "We were lenient. Most associations wouldn't approve someone with that history. Frankly, no one would live in a house with that kind of stink on it. Which is why you should be grateful for a serious tenant presence to validate you." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so precisely, spectacularly wrong. I'd moved from a rental duplex across town when my landlord sold the property. I left a paint touch-up can and a diagram of how to replace the wonky faucet. I got my entire deposit back. I kept the automated email because I save receipts like a dragon saves gold. "I wasn't evicted," I said. "I moved with a full refund. But even if I had been, that wouldn't oblige me to host your night patrol. And even if I wanted to host a person, you don't have authority to assign house guests." Across the street, Geranium 1 made a show of checking her watch. Like if she squinted hard enough, my refusal would turn into the time we all agreed on. Marla had geared up for pushback. She had sentences ready, stacked inside each other like nesting dolls. Section 4.2 of the CC&Rs gives the board authority to take necessary temporary measures for safety. You're refusing a safety measure. That's a violation. "I have the CC&Rs inside," I said, and Section 4.2 talks about emergency repairs in common areas. Roof leaks, pool fencing, lighting. It doesn't say I have to host a guy named Trey. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped. But the way her eyes flicked said she wasn't entirely sure of her own citation. "Ridiculous is standing on my porch with a duffel ready to plant a sentry in my guest room." I took a breath and softened my voice. "Look, your committee can do whatever patrols they want in the common areas, as long as it's within the budget and you follow the open meeting rules. But you don't get to conscript a spare bedroom. We're done here." "I'll be fining you," she said. And I'll be notifying the board that you're unfit for this community due to your eviction history. I'll be appealing anything in writing, I said, and I'll be asking for the minutes where the board approved this placement policy, and all supporting documents. Also, I'll need the written background check on Trey if you're assigning him keys. That's state law for contractors, and if he's not a contractor, he shouldn't be issued anything. Trey lowered his duffel like it had gotten heavier. I don't need keys, he said quietly. I'm just here because my aunt said it was a quick gig. Aunt? I asked. Marla's jaw clenched. This is community business, not your business. It's my house, I said. All of it is my business. For long seconds, nobody moved. The air tasted like heated plastic. Finally, Marla executed a pivot that deserved a marching band. Fine, she said briskly. You've made your position clear. I'll get the paperwork started. Expect a fine. And don't bother trying to sell later. No one wants an address attached to an eviction. Some things stick. She turned, heels stabbing the step. Trey mouthed sorry at me like a kid apologizing for someone else's broken window and followed her. The geranium audience retreated indoors, satisfied or spooked. I couldn't tell which. I locked the door. I took another bite of my sandwich that now tasted of adrenaline. I stood in my quiet living room and scanned the mental checklist I kept for moments when authority showed up and tried to be bigger than the rules. I have a boring job with exciting side effects. I do contracting work for small businesses that need help getting their records together before a bank or an audit comes calling. I do tidy for a living. I label for serenity. My coping mechanisms wear barcodes. I set down my plate, washed my hands, and went to the dining table where the binder lived. The CC and Rs were a trilogy: covenants, bylaws, rules, and regulations. Together, they could level a wobbly table. I opened to section 4.2. It was exactly what I remembered. Emergency expenditures and authority to repair common area hazards. Nothing about conscripting my couch. I made coffee. I powered up my scanner. If these people were going to play law and order, I was going to be the person who reads the law. I typed a letter on plain white paper because I've learned that letterhead makes people arch their backs. Plain white makes them read. To the Board and Community Compliance Committee, I respectfully deny any request to house a patrol or other individual in my private residence. Please provide written policy authorizing temporary housing of personnel in private homes, citing governing documents, minutes and agenda from the board meeting where such policy was approved, including roll call vote, contract and licensing information for Trey, safety patrol or otherwise, including background checks if he is to be issued any access to common areas. Your notice of fine, if any, including the violation cited and the statute or rule it's based on. All communications referring to an eviction history linked to my name or property, including source and date. This is a formal demand to cease and desist defamation. You are on notice that continued false statements will result in civil action. Regards, me. I printed it. I sent the email version to the address at the bottom of the monthly newsletter. No exact company names, just a Gmail that called itself Community Board Official. I sent the paper copy certified mail because half of the fights in these communities aren't over substance. They're over who can prove they said a thing. I thought it would buy me time. I underestimated Marla's zeal. The next morning, I found a fluorescent slip on my door like a parking ticket. Notice of non-compliance. Failure to cooperate with safety measure. Fine. $100/day until resolved. Board has discretion to levy liens. It was signed in a tight scribble. The dateline said, effective immediately, which is HOA for, we'll make up retroactive if we want. Attached with the same tape was a single sheet of paper that looked like it had been drafted in a hurry. Temporary Housing Protocol. Community Safety Initiative. It referenced section 4.2 again. It had 3 bullet points, 2 typos, and an effective date of the day before. No minutes attached. No roll call vote. No contract. No background check. I am not the person who goes nuclear on day 2. I'm the person who reads how the fuse was built. So I went to the filing cabinet. I pulled the flyer from when I bought the place, the one that said friendly association, walkable paths, quiet nights, with stock photos of couples who look like they jog together and own matching dogs. I pulled the contact sheet from escrow with the registered agent for the association, and I drafted 2 more letters, one to the association's council of record, one to the property management company listed with the Secretary of State. I checked. I keep receipts. Dear Council, Management, please see attached. A notice of non-compliance and an alleged temporary housing protocol taped to my door without minutes, agenda, or vote record. The policy is not in the adopted rules nor in the CC&Rs. It was approved without an open meeting notice to members as required by state law. I cited the statute, which requires proper notice for rules affecting owners, without a proper vote, and without contract vetting. Furthermore, your agents are spreading false statements about my supposed eviction history, which is defamation per se, as it imputes an inability to fulfill contractual obligations and damages property value. I request in writing 1. Rescission of the notice and fines, 2. A written retraction of the false eviction claim circulated in the community. I enclose the email confirmation of my deposit refund from my prior landlord, and 3. Confirmation that no person will be placed in any owner's residence without that owner's private written consent. If I do not receive confirmation within 5 business days, I will file for injunctive relief and damages in small claims or superior court as appropriate, and I will file a complaint with the State Department that oversees homeowner associations. Regards, me. I sent those certified too. Then I went to work. The first call started at 2 p.m. Unknown numbers, a sweet spot for, do I answer or let it go to voicemail? I let them go. The voicemails were bad acting. We heard about the eviction. Is your home safe? One said in a voice pitched to sound concerned but thrilled. Maybe someone staying there would help, another suggested with all the subtlety of a brochure. At 5 p.m., when my brain was soup, I stepped outside to pull the trash can in and found a folding chair on my front strip of common grass with a laminated sign, Neighborhood Patrol Post. A thermos sat on the chair like it had a reservation. There was no one in it. I scanned up and down and saw nobody, but the message was clear. We're in your orbit, even if we can't breach your walls. I moved the chair to the sidewalk and left it there. I took the sign inside, not to keep evidence. That night, I found the neighborhood's social page, which was exactly the kind of online arena you're imagining. Photos of suspicious teenagers who were just walking home, arguments about whether the pool should allow floaties, and one thread titled, Concern New Owner with Eviction History. It had the sanctimony of a potluck where someone brought tuna salad in July. I did not comment, I screenshot. 2 days later, the notices escalated. Second notice, failure to cooperate. The fine had jumped to $250/day. There was a new attachment, board minutes, emergency approval of safety initiative. It was 1 paragraph long, unsigned, with no roll call and no meeting location listed. It claimed an email vote because of urgency. I looked at the date. It was the afternoon after Marla had stood on my porch. They were working backward to justify. I pulled my phone and called the property management number. A tired woman named Bryn answered, crisp and professional in that way people learn when they've been yelled at for years. I'm calling about an alleged rule, I said, and gave my address. I need the actual minutes with meeting notice and attendance, not the paragraph taped to my door. There was a rustle of keys. We haven't posted any minutes regarding a housing initiative, she said. There can't be temporary policies affecting owners without a noticed meeting. Then someone used your logo and typed up a minute, I said. Also, I've been fined $250 a day for refusing to house a patrol. There was a silence that turned into a slow exhale. I'll escalate to council, she said. Management didn't authorize that. The board can vote, but there are steps. If they skipped them, that's a problem. Also, your board rep is telling people I was evicted, I said. That's false. I have proof. I'm sending a demand letter. Send it, she said, weariness spiking into anger that wasn't aimed at me. Email it to me too. And if someone leaves anything on your property, call the non-emergency number and report trespass. Common area is one thing, private is another. You know the line. I did, and now apparently so would they. That evening, a kid I vaguely knew from seeing him skateboard into cul-de-sacs knocked shyly. He wore a hoodie with a hand-drawn logo and held a crumpled flyer. Miss, he said, they gave me $5 to put these on doors. He held out the flyer like it was ticking. Claims no one would live in that house, it said, under a photo of my street. My house blurred but obvious to anyone who lived here. A paragraph urged temporary housing cooperation for owners with troubled histories. I read it twice, 3 times. No exact names, no explicit eviction, but the insinuation was a floodlight. Did Marla give this to you? I asked. He nodded, said it's community service. Hang on, I said, and got my wallet. I handed him $10. Double the rate for not delivering them, I said. Give me the stack, and do not put any on any door. This is not community service. This is harassment, and they used you to do it, not your fault. He looked like $10 had just enrolled him in a witness protection program. "Thanks," he said, and fled with a speed that would have made a coach clap. I took the stack, photographed it, and emailed Bryn and counsel again. I CC'd myself. I labeled the file harassment_flyer_V1. You don't choose a war. Sometimes it writes its name on your mail. 3 dawns later, the board called an emergency town hall. The email came with 2 hours' notice, set for 7 in the morning. They scheduled it on the grass near the mailbox cluster, a move that communicated both urgent and we make the rules. I went with coffee and a folder under my arm. Neighbors gathered in pajama pants and judgment. Marla stood on a planter, clipboard held like a conductor's baton. Beside her, a man with a tan that looked expensive and a suit that was trying too hard. Deacon smiled like a commercial. He was the board president, a recent import who had a knack for fundraising and speechifying, and exactly none for the rules that govern small democracies. "We're here," Deacon boomed, "because some folks think their private choices should outweigh community safety. We're here to say, not in our neighborhood." He made eye contact with me on that last line like a laser pointer. I raised my hand. "Questions after," he said, then remembered he should sound open. "Briefly, yes?" "Is there a posted agenda?" I asked. "What?" "Open meeting law," I said, because I am that person and proud of it. If you're discussing rules affecting owners, you need an agenda 24 hours in advance. You can't adopt a new housing protocol at a mailbox rally. Someone actually clapped. It surprised them. Their palms met with a sound that said they hadn't planned to make that noise, and yet it felt foreordained. Deacon smiled thinner. "This isn't a formal meeting, this is a community conversation." "Then no policy decisions today," I said, "just conversation." He didn't answer that directly. He pivoted. "We've had thefts," he said. "Vandalism. We need night presence." The board approved a temporary placement in a home near the trouble area. The homeowner refused. "Because it's not real," I said. "No authority in the CC&Rs, no minutes, no vote, no contract for Mr. Trey there. Hi, Trey, who did nothing wrong but take a gig. Also, distributing flyers implying my house is unlivable due to an eviction stink is defamatory." "I never said your address," Marla interjected too quickly. "You didn't have to," I said, holding up the flyer. "A photo of our street with a paragraph. That's like saying the house painted blue with red trim and then claiming you never said number 14. Everyone knows which house is newest. This is harassment." "It's community awareness," Deacon said. "We're allowed to warn neighbor." "False statements aren't warnings," I said. "They're liability. When you say claims no one would live in this house because the owner was evicted, you're alleging facts about me that are not true. That's defamation per se. My former landlord has already provided a letter that I left in good standing with a full deposit refund. I'll be recording a declaration today. Also," I held up the notice, "your fines are void because you can't fine for refusing to waive rights you don't have a right to demand." "Someone woke up with a law degree," Marla muttered, but her voice had lost some starch. "I woke up with a binder," I said, "and a job where I bring paperwork to knife fights." At that, the crowd, some of it, laughed. Not cruelly, but like a kink had been released. A man named Holloway, who I knew only because he spent more time than physics allows on his porch swing, cleared his throat. "We pay dues," he said. "If the board has money for patrols, they can hire someone to walk the path. Why do they need to live in a house?" Deacon's smile faltered. He hadn't expected pushback from someone who liked porch swings. "It's centralization," he tried. "Faster response." "Response to what?" Another voice chimed in. A woman I later learned was Talia, who runs a home bakery that sells out of cookies every Saturday by 10. Vandalized mailboxes, kids jumping the pool fence. That's what cameras are for, or the actual police when it rises to that level. We don't turn private homes into little guard stations because someone on the board can't sleep. "It's not that I can't sleep," Marla said, indignant, then realized she'd said too much. "It's people feel better when there's someone who knows what's what. People feel better when the rules are followed," I said. "All of us, including the board." Something shifted. A breeze found the maples and carried through the group like an agreement. It didn't make the HOA suddenly benevolent, but it did make Marla look for a second, like she'd been caught misplacing a decimal. Deacon cleared his throat. "We'll take comments under advisement." He glanced at Bryn, who had arrived somewhere between my first and third sip of coffee and was standing with her arms folded, physics of patience keeping her upright. "The board will confer. The board will notice a meeting where members can attend," Bryn said, her voice smooth but immovable. "We'll also be pulling recent communications for review. That includes flyers. In the meantime, no one is moving into anyone's house without that owner's written consent. It's weird how relief can be both enormous and very precise. I felt it like a window popped open. I didn't smile. Not yet. After the gathering, a cluster of neighbors drifted toward me. One, a lanky kid with a name tag from the hardware store, Jax, said he'd seen Trey at what he called Marla's nephew's place, which was really a short-term rental inside the neighborhood that was a sore subject because it violated the CC and Rs. Interesting, I thought, and the word echoed. Because here was the thing, I hadn't come to this place to be a crusader. I wanted a garage and a patch of grass to coax into not dying, but I have a stubborn streak that glares when someone pushes the weak point on purpose. Marla had picked my porch to test a power she didn't have, and the rumors about my eviction weren't a slip, they were a tool. I went home, I opened my laptop, I made a list titled Things That Smell Like Smoke. Emergency policy with no minutes, $250/day fines typed after the fact. Flyers with photo of my street, comment threads implying eviction, short-term rental rumor, Marla's nephew or friend, Trey and his duffel, Deacon's fundraising style, and the line item on the last budget called Community Outreach, $8,500, that nobody could explain at the last annual meeting beyond events. I don't believe in conspiracies. I believe in laziness and greed wearing a fleece vest, but you can't know which until you pull the thread and see what it's attached to. That afternoon, a certified letter arrived. The return address was the association's council. I signed. Inside, a pause in fines pending review, a statement that no policy requiring owners to house personnel had been adopted, and a note that the association did not condone defamatory statements about owners. It was either an olive branch or legal triage. Either way, it meant I had a document for my folder labeled, "They are aware." I taped it inside the cover. Then I did what calm people do when they don't want to be calm. I cleaned. I hit baseboards with fervor. I swapped out a chirping smoke alarm battery before it could chirp again. I mowed my tiny front yard with a rhythm that said I was mowing something else. When you clean, your brain sorts. It sorted until two lines intersected. The short-term rental, the community placement, the nephew. I went for a walk that evening, the way people accidentally walk past exes at the grocery store. I went past the house the kid had described, notable for its twice-weekly parade of rolling suitcases and the world's most enterprising fake fern by the door. The porch light burned a permanent yellow, a beacon for the new and the lost. On the gate, small and dumb, was a laminated card that said, "Community Authorized." I took a photo. Back home, I pulled the CC and Rs again. Rentals were allowed with minimum 12-month leases, and all leases must be registered with the association within 10 days. No short-term rentals, no transient lodging, no hotels by any other name. You could host a cousin for a week. You couldn't host 24 cousins a year for 3 days at a time. It was one of the rules that had roped me in when I was shopping. I like neighbors who stay long enough to learn which nights the trash trucks come. I sent a new email to Bryn, subject line, "Potential unapproved short-term rental, connection to community placement issue." Hi Bryn, per our earlier conversation, there appears to be a dwelling operating as an unapproved short-term rental. It also appears connected to the attempt to place a patrol in my home. Kid said it was a nephew of Marla. I'm not accusing blood relations, just reporting. Photo attached. If the board has really been concerned about safety, maybe start with enforcing the no transient lodging rule before conscripting private bedrooms. Me, I CC'd council because we were friends now in the way people become comrades after sharing a trench. In reply, Bryn asked for the address and said, "We'll investigate." I believed her in the tentative way you believe someone who has paperwork and doesn't flinch. 3 days later, I found a second laminated sign on a different lawn strip. Neighborhood Patrol Post. This one had a traffic cone beside it, as if a cone conferred jurisdiction. I took a photo. Then I took the cone. It was heavy for something that has no mass morally. I set it in my garage. If they wanted it back, they could ask with their words and a legal reason. That evening, my doorbell rang again. Not the six-peck woodpecker rhythm of before. This time, a calm, precise tap-tap. On my porch stood an older man with iron gray hair, a windbreaker with a stitched logo I won't name, and a folder under his arm. Next to him was a woman in a cardigan with a notebook. They looked like accountants, which in my world is a sign of peace. "Hi," he said. "I'm Soren. I'm on the finance committee. This is Annika. We don't want to take up your time, but we wanted to talk about the pattern." I let them in because intuition is a muscle you're supposed to use. They sat at my table and put their folder on the binder like they were stacking calluses. "We're not fans of drama," Annika said, getting to the point. "But we've seen the fines lately. Not just you. There are others who've been fined for things that are not in the rules. And the community outreach budget line has been tapped for flyers." Soren slid a piece of paper across to me. It was a budget reconciliation printed by someone who loved spreadsheets as much as I do. The community outreach line had checks written to cash, receipts for printing, and in one scrawled memo, a notation: "Volunteer stipend, patrol family." "That one," he said, tapping it, "was cashed by Marla." "You're telling me she paid herself from the outreach budget?" I said, not asking, because the numbers told the story. "And her nephew," Annika said quietly, "who didn't finish the onboarding for security with the vendor we tried out last spring. He didn't pass the background check due to a minor record. He's not a danger. This isn't about demonizing him, but he can't work the patrol under the insurance. So, they tried to make him an in-house thing. Cheaper, and technically outside the contractor rules. If housed by an owner, they were going to label him a guest volunteer to avoid the insurance hurdle." My laugh was short and held no joy. "If housed by me," I said, connecting the line, "because once a thing exists, they can point to it. We have precedent." "That's what we were afraid of," Annika said. "We thought if we brought you paperwork, you'd know what to do. We've been outvoted at meetings by Deacon and Marla's block, but that doesn't mean our minutes have to be bad." "You've come to the right nerd," I said, and for the first time since the doorbell's opening salvo, I felt something like control. We spent an hour going through the financials they'd managed to scrape from management emails and the posted reports. We highlighted. We cross-referenced. It wasn't embezzlement in neon. It was sloppy, policy-bending stuff that adds up. A reimbursement here, a personal print job there, stipends to volunteers that don't exist in the bylaws. Then Soren said, almost as an afterthought, "There's also a line for digital community engagement." "Like social media ads?" I asked. "That's what it says, but the reimbursements are all to Marla's personal payment app. Notes like boosted post and awareness campaign." "Awareness of fake evictions," I muttered. The common space concatenated with my private life, turning it into a billboard. "We're not trying to pick a fight you didn't choose," Annika said gently. "But if you're going to file a complaint, we wanted you to know you're not alone." I took a breath. "I'm not filing a complaint." They looked concerned. "I'm filing 3, I said. 1 formal complaint with the States Association oversight, 1 small claims action for defamation against Marla personally, and 1 petition for a recall election. We're going to do this by the book. Turns out I like books." Soren's laugh was low and delighted in that way people laugh when the back foot of their patience finally finds purchase. "You'll need signatures," he said. "I'll bake cookies," I said. "I know a woman named Talia whose cookie supply could topple governments." Annika smiled. "I'll print the petitions from my own printer. They can find me for toner. I dare them." We set a plan. It had bullet points, deadlines, and my favorite clause, a contingency for pettiness. Big moves matter, but sometimes it's the cone in a garage that keeps you smiling while the forms are boring. Next morning, I took a slow walk with purpose, knocking on doors where I'd seen people water plants or wave at the mail truck. I didn't lead with recall. I led with, "Hi, I'm the new owner. That flyer saying I'm unfit is false. If they'll do this to me, they'll do it to you." I carried a printed copy of my deposit refund email. Not because I owed proof, but because sometimes truth needs a costume. Responses varied, a few closed doors, some murmured that they hated drama. More than I expected said, "We've noticed." Devin said he'd been fined $200 for leaving his trash can visible 4 hours on a Tuesday. "Only mine," he said. "My neighbor leaves theirs out all day. She brings cookies to meetings." He signed the petition. By mid-afternoon, I had 20 signatures for hold a recall meeting and 10 for I will vote for recall. We needed a percentage of the community to trigger it. We'd cross it by the weekend. I sent a courtesy email to management and council letting them know a petition was underway. Not required, just my preferred petty weapon. People expecting feral get rattled by polite. At dusk, Trey knocked with his duffel like a shield. "I didn't know they'd do that," he said. "My aunt told me you volunteered. Said the board asked and you were honored to host." "I don't blame you," I said. "I blame whoever told you to show up. You were being used." "I wanted a job watching for kids messing with mailboxes," he said. "Not to be a chess piece." "Then don't be. Tell the truth, and if your aunt tries to pull you in again, say no. That's still allowed." He laughed, then cried for exactly 1 second. "My cousin's got a couch. he said. Good, sleep matters. I asked about the short-term rental. They think they're slick, he said. Listed under a friend's name, guests for 3 nights. Nobody verifies. They figured if I lived at your place, they could call it normal. Thanks for the honesty, I said, and for not being a cone. The following week, management noticed a special recall meeting. Agenda: rules, procedures, budget anomalies, recall, interim appointments. Marla posted that it was an attack by malcontents. Deacon posted a slick video about vision. I posted nothing. Truth is quiet, that's its power. The meeting felt like a Thanksgiving where the turkey hit the floor and we all pretended it didn't. Sign-in looked like a DMV with stamina. Bryn called us to order and set the 2-minute rule. Annika calmly presented the timeline, backdated minutes, no notice, suspended fines. Paper spoke. Soren walked through budget leaks with kindness that made the numbers unforgiving. Deacon tried to interrupt. Counsel clicked a seatbelt on him with 1 sentence. Marla cried, said she felt unsafe, that doorbell-ditching kids justified breaking rules. 3 neighbors explained that fear doesn't grant authority to conscript private bedrooms. Then I spoke, voice interstate slow. You tried to make my home a precedent. You invented a policy you lacked authority to invent. When I refused, you posted flyers about me and tried to find me into submission. That isn't safety, it's bullying. We can do patrols and cameras with proper notice, votes, and contracts. But we can't have a board whose job is making disfavored owners feel unwelcome. Rumors about evictions aren't tools. This is a community, not a fiefdom. If you don't want to follow rules, step aside. The vote wasn't a landslide, but it was decisive. The majority, Deacon and 2 others, were recalled. An interim slate took over. Marla, technically not on the board, lost her committee chair. The new board issued a public retraction about the eviction rumor and apologized to me by name. That mattered. I still had 1 more set of paperwork. I went to small claims with screenshots, flyers, and a letter from my former landlord. The judge looked at Marla's general statement's defense, then at the flyer featuring my street, and raised an eyebrow into orbit. He found for me, ordered a small payment, and barred further lies. Not ruinous, just a sticky note from the legal system. Enough. The short-term rental ended after a cease and desist and a hearing with minutes kept like stone. A family with twins moved in. They treat the mailbox cluster like a castle. Trey took a job at the hardware store with Jax, started walking the paths for exercise, then trained with a volunteer response group that actually coordinates with the city. When he passed my house, he waved. Months later, the patrol cones disappeared. Laminated signs curled in some shed. My house found rhythm. Morning coffee. The hallway squeak I still haven't fixed. Kids scootering like they own velocity. I kept my binder current not because I expected another inside-out rule, but because peace looks good on paper. The newsletter after the recall printed community clarifications. No owner had been evicted. Such statements were false. Apologies extended. Budgets corrected. Contracts bid properly. A cleanup photo showed Marla with a trash picker like someone recently introduced to cause and effect. Sometimes a punishment is a chair pulled from under a throne no one should have climbed. Sometimes it's a check cut for a lie. Sometimes it's picking up gum wrappers with everyone else. Weeks later, the same looping handwriting left a check for the judgment and a note. I thought I was protecting what I loved. I forgot we love people, not power. I'm sorry. I filed it behind the court order. Apologies are receipts too. The arc became ordinary. Rumor, refusal, paperwork, recall, repair, cookies, chalk, a quiet mailbox. I kept the cone in my garage as a trophy. When Trey delivered a misdelivered package, he grinned. Lights and justice, you know. I looked toward the cone, now cradling paint and an extension cord. You ever gonna return that? He asked. No, I said. Good, he said. Every neighborhood needs a trophy. Maybe that's what we built, not spectacle, but consequence. Not sashes, but snacks. A binder with tabs. A front door color nobody argued about for a month. A community that knows exactly where the common area ends and a living room begins, and likes it that way. The spare room finally got used by my cousin, who set down her bag and said, "It's so quiet in here." I smiled. Me too. Friends, thank you. See you soon.